Years.
About
100 years, 200 years?
About 100 years.
Suppose this world were 1,000 times, 10,000 times its size, though, a really big world.
Well, I probably want to be around about 3,000 years.
3,000 years. Well, that's just an ordinary garden variety time and space world. Don't you imagine each Havona world is tremendously more intriguing than a world like ours?
But I've often wondered how long it's going to take us to get there. 200 billion years.
Well, now stop and think. 200 billion. Wait a minute, Wilma. You missed 3 zeros. It's 200 billion. Now,
What's the difference?
if Clyde would be willing to spend 3,000, 300 years?
No,
3,000.
3,000 if you had it just
A big world, you know.
You had it first if I just traverse distance, at least 100 years.
Well, if Clyde would be willing to spend 3,000 years on a really big world, he'd certainly be willing to spend at least that long on each Havona world. Well, that's 3,000 billion years he'd like to spend going through Havona, just for traveling purposes. Now they've got some studying for us to do besides that. So it seems to me that it would be awful easy to spend 3,000 billion years is 3 trillion years. It seems to me it'd be awful easy to spend 10 trillion years going through Havona. That's only 3 times as long as you'd want to spend anyway on a really big world.
Well, I'll say I'm wondering who's going to buy my ticket.
You're going through on
You're
expensive
going to buy
tickets.
your ticket. You're going to not rely on your own working for that ticket, though.
I'll be bald here.
You'll work your way through.
Now you see, we've already got 10 trillion years. No, yeah, 10,000
Smarter
billion.
boy than Pies.
Yeah. So you can see, Wilma, even if it took 400 billion years, 400 billion years is only 40% of 10 trillion years. So even with our outside estimate, I don't think we're going to feel that it's a long time. I think we'll sort of feel, well, we'd like to kind of stay here and take one more trip. We haven't been up in the fjord country, or we haven't seen this or that or the other thing.
Well, Bill, after you fuse with the thought adjuster, time won't be nothing to you then, will it?
Yes, I think so. It won't mean it to the adjuster, but it'll still mean it
Well,
to us.
I mean, us as individuals.
I think
We're a little
so.
anxious now,
Yeah.
running a little scared, see?
You
But
mean
when
not
we
so much.
fuse, it gives us a tranquilizer, and time won't need nothing.
It won't have the same goading effect on us. No, I think it's going to take quite a while, and I don't think we'll be in a hurry. There's too much that's exciting. You see, when you get to Jerusalem, you get visitors' privileges on 619 worlds. 618, pardon me. You can't come back here, but you can go to any other world. Now, when you get up to Edentia, you're going to have 100 times that many worlds. You'll see if you want to. And can ride piggyback on some seraphim that's going there. So there's so much to see, let alone what there is to do. Because each one of these worlds has a unique history, is different, has different kinds of problems. We're going to meet natives from these worlds. We're going to get curious about their cultures, where they came from, what it's like. We'll be interested in going to see these places.
Their world will have different cosmic origins.
Mm-hmm. When you get to Salvington, you've got over 3.5 million worlds that you could visit. And don't you suppose you'll be interested in seeing other constellations besides just Edentia, or other systems besides just Jerusalem?
So this sounds like heaven now.
Well, I think it's going to be a ball. I think it's going to be extremely exciting, interesting, adventurous, and at times very trying. Insofar as we are still procrastinators, equivocators, unfair, ease-seeking, and problem avoidance.
You know, a gem collector will have fun.
Yeah?
Or maybe too common then.
Well, but each one, they will have different source materials and different history. Geologically, there will be
Sure.
different rock and different natural history.
Where? Somebody tell me where in that New Hampshire book it tells about one of the worlds that has the walls built and the people look down upon the...
It's on Jerusalem. Those are the different circles, circular inhabitation.
We'll be to that
Is
next
that
Sunday night or two.
well, I probably won't be there tonight then. Is that the one in which it tells about the...
About the temple.
No, about the section that we go to.
Egg and daughters.
Yeah.
The section that we go to. Is it in that same paper?
No, it's on a different paper.
In the same song, same truth?
But we live together. I'll bet you we'll be kind of freaks, don't you?
Yeah, dead end kids,
I wonder if I could ask a question on the board.
certainly. That's our subject of discussion
Do
this
you
evening.
see an overlapping of creative and evolutional
Yes,
level?
certainly. Because one is an aspect of the other.
Creative and evolutional.
When
I thought that they were in existence now and always.
well,
Evolution and creation.
they're in existence in the second universe age, yes. Evolution implies creativity. But it's creativity in time.
Well, your question has to do with the second universe, the first universe age.
Here, a
Period
seraphim,
between the first universe age and second universe age.
Well,
When you say an
there's
overlap.
the creative level, I think, takes place in the first universe age or at the close of the first universe age. But it takes
let's take
place in the second too.
let's take three individuals. Let's take a divine counselor, created by the Trinity, created in flawless perfection, perhaps ultimate perfection. No amount of experience can possibly improve on his counsel because this is the counsel of the Trinity right from start. You can't improve on it. That's pure creativity. Let's take a human being, starting out as a zygote and progressing therefrom by cellular multiplication. Ma'am? Well, a zygote's a fertilized ovum.
Is a what?
Fertilized ovum. And you were also once happy little zygotes.
Each and every one.
That's right. And this is pretty pure evolution. Now let's take a seraphim, who was created a seraphim, but thereafter evolves. There's a mixture of creation and evolution. The divine counselor, pure creation. The ascending mortal, pure evolution. The seraphim, a mixture of creation and evolution.
But I thought Bert spoke of it in the past.
Now, I said, is there an overlapping?
Sure there
the
is.
two?
Sure there is.
Did you notice her?
Sure there is.
No, I asked him if there was.
There is.
Confirm my
It
thinking.
exists now.
Sure. Michael, created in divine perfection, but Michael has evolved. Michael was born a creator son. Michael is now a master son. Michael is added to the divinity of paradise. Well, for one thing, the humanity of man, and 6 other character qualities or aspects which he picked up on 6 other bestowals. Michael's a man as well as a creator son. Jesus lives in Michael. And if we'd meet him, we could fraternize with that phase of Michael. You could hardly fraternize with a creator as a creator. But we could fraternize with the human aspect of Michael.
As a creator, he would be a spirit being. He would hardly be able to.
Well, as a creator, he's just more than a creature. For example, if he walked in on Salvington, I think we'd stand in his presence. We wouldn't sit around and swap stories. You know what I mean? This is not a creature. This is God in our local universe.
Birthday, something like that, you birthday up.
Well, you don't think it'd be written difficult, do you?
Yeah, 'cause there's always a little bit of red on you somewhere, like a tassel. Where do you suppose eventuation comes in here?
Now, that's what I wanted to ask you next. Do you think the creative level overlaps the ultimate? That's supposed to be the last. That's supposed to be the last.
Yeah.
Of creation. So it
When
has to-
deity functions on the ultimate level, this is the final creative level. Beyond this, there is no creation. Now, that doesn't mean that nothing new can happen beyond this, but if it happens, it's not going to be in the created sense of the word. You'll remember that God as a three-person fragments, as a person creates, as a superperson eventuates. That these are all manifestations of relative divinity, not absolute divinity. God the Absolute functions on a post-creative level. Now, I've speculated on what words are used. Maybe the word eternalize is a super-creative word. Maybe the word deitize is a super-creative word. Those words are occasionally used in these papers.
Deitize sometimes is, you could refer to it as a technique of bringing into existence, couldn't you?
Which may be post-creative. Eternalize.
Eventuated is post-creative, huh?
I don't know.
No. Supposed to be.
God creates on both the supreme and the ultimate level, but not on the absolute level. I'm sure he has a technique for transforming potentials into actuals on the absolute level. But if so, the word create is not a proper word to use to describe it.
Would trinitization on finite or of finaliters and paradise citizens, would that be a method of creation?
No. It's a different word. Well, maybe it is. A kind of creation. But it's finite. But when the Father and the Son trinitized the infinite Spirit, this was not finite, neither was it absonite, this was absolute.
But it's a pattern followed
Yeah,
on a finite level.
right.
So it may be a technique of creation.
Yeah, but it's also, well, it can have repercussions that are super finite,
Oh,
though.
that's true.
As in the
Does
case of mixed trinitizing
Does
pairs. Yeah.
Sure does.
The trinitized sons of destiny are not exactly finite.
That's true.
At least they're not limited to the
But
present universe age.
they're not finite, but they're abstinite. They're on that level.
It doesn't say so. It says that the words of abstinite being. But it doesn't say that they transcend the present universe age in their
And they don't
concept.
grow right now. They're getting ready for the next one.
It
so
doesn't say they don't grow. It doesn't say they do. I agree with
Well,
you. I
they-
don't think they do.
They isolate them.
The sons
so
of
to
destiny, they do. Correct.
That's what I'm talking about
Right.
now.
The other creature trinitized sons don't grow either. They're in but not of the present universe age. This is all Greek, I know. Creation and trinitization are two different things. Can I read you a couple little chunks? Would you be interested? I'll see if I can. We are instructed to think of God as a creator, but creatorship is not even classified as one of the attributes of God. It is designated as rather the aggregate of his acting nature. In this particular context, we believe creatorship is being used in a very large sense, in the sense of designating any technique that might be employed to bring something or someone into existence. In this sense, it could possibly include God's personal, pre-personal, and super-personal techniques: creation, fragmentation, and eventuation. And all of these techniques are employed on levels of sub-infinite value and relative divinity expression. We may or may not have been given the names that refer to God's super-creative action in relation to universal values and absolute divinity expression. Perhaps the terms eternalize or deitize are employed in this connection. When we explore creativity, we find three kinds of creativity: unlimited creativity, creativity limited by plans, and creativity limited by circumstances. Unlimited creativity is illustrated by the Creator Sons. Their number is constantly increasing. Apparently, there's no limitation to the ability of the Father and the Son to bring forth these creators. A creative spirit seems to be able to produce seraphim without limit. Creativity limited by plans. In contrast to the increasing numbers of the Creator Sons, the unions of days are of stationary numbers. There are exactly 700,000 of them, and no more are being created. Unions of days are of Trinity origin, and it is unthinkable that the Paradise Trinity would be unable to create more of them. But to what purpose? Exactly the required number are now in existence, and any additional unions of days would be supernumerary to the established plans of the super-universes. They wouldn't have any jobs. Creativity limited by circumstances. In these situations, the creators seem to encounter some external factor that limits creativity. This limitation must be inherent in the circumstances of the situation. Consider the following examples. 1. The eternal Son can transmit creator prerogatives, but he is not able to transmit to his Creator Sons the ability to create additional creators. 2. The Master Spirits would appear to be a classical example of creativity that is limited by the circumstances of the situation. There are exactly 7 of the Master Spirits, and there could be no other number, because no other number would satisfy the situation which calls for the sub-absolute expression of the single and plural combinations of the three paradise deities in action. Even the gods are unable to alter mathematics. 3. Solitary messengers are of stationary numbers. We do not know whether this is a limitation that is self-imposed to the Infinite Spirit, or a limitation inherent in the bestowal of Supreme Ultimate Mind. 4. Bright and morning stars, the local universe chief executives, are limited in numbers to 1 in each local creation. This limitation does not occur because these chief executives are trinitized. They are not trinitized. In the creation of such a being, the parental universe Son and Spirit are not conjoined in any manner. Neither is the resulting Gabriel their creative equal. Nevertheless, we are instructed they can create only one. Evidently, some basic potential in each local universe is exhausted when its chief executive is created. And then there are other illustrations. And then this stands in contrast to trinitizing. Creation and trinitization both bring new orders of beings into existence, but creation is never referred to as a secret. The technique of trinitization is regarded as one of the basic secrets in the universes, as in the expressions, the secrets of Vice Jerrington and the secrets of Solitarington. Creation is seemingly limited to sub-infinite levels of reality. Trinitization is not. The infinite spirit is the result of a trinitizing episode, and the third person of deity is the infinite equal of the Father-Son. These are a few of the more obvious differences between the transformative techniques of creation and trinitization. There are undoubtedly many other more subtle differences that completely escape our notice. As it is used in the papers, the word trinitize seems to have at least three distinct meanings. Is this of interest?
Mm-hmm.
A. Limited trinitization. B. The Trinity embrace. And C. Unlimited trinitization. It will be both interesting and profitable to explore these three techniques for actualizing potentialities. All three are in operation in the grand universe of the present age. A. Limited trinitization. This transformative technique is the most interesting of the three kinds of trinitization because it is so like and yet unlike creation. Limited trinitization appears to be characterized by three distinct happenings. 1. The parental beings are united in some manner. 2. The trinitized offspring is their equal in status. 3. The parental beings can never repeat this trinitization. The origin of the infinite spirit is the original and the perfect example of a limited trinitization. The Father and the Son have been united as the Father-Son ever since this trinitization of the infinite spirit. The infinite spirit is the deity equal of the Father and the Son. There can never be another infinite spirit. Only one is possible. When the Father and Son subsequently unite to produce a creator, they succeed in producing a creator Son. Such a Son is truly a creator, but he is sub-infinite in scope of creative action. I'll skip this one where it takes two to trinitize. Creature trinitization offers a very good example of limited trinitization. It is axiomatic that a creature cannot create anything, but certain creatures are able to engage in the adventure of trinitization, thus bringing into existence the three major orders of the creature trinitized sons. When two qualified creatures engage in the act of trinitization, it is a typical example of limited trinitization, and will stand examination on the three counts that seem to be characteristic of this act, of this kind of trinitization. A. The parental beings are united in some manner. The two parental creatures experience a union, spiritual by unification, that lasts for the duration of the present universe age. B. The trinitized offspring is their equal in status. The two parental beings are creatures. Their trinitized offspring is also a creature, hence is their equal in creature status. C. The parental beings can never repeat this trinitization. We are informed that the two trinitizing creatures cannot repeat this act of trinitization. We get into the depth and scope of trinitization, which is interesting, but a bit belabored. Not so belabored. B. The Trinity embrace. When a creature is embraced by the Paradise Trinity, this act is also designated trinitization. When such beings have been embraced by the Paradise Trinity, they are then assigned to the governments of the superuniverses, where they serve as the coordinates of the Trinity origin ambassadors. and then unlimited trinitization. It's the third kind. So far as we can determine, this type of trinitization is the sole prerogative of the Paradise deities. So far as we are informed in the papers, this type of trinitization is virtually indistinguishable from the act of creation. Undoubtedly, there are many important differences between these two transformative techniques, but we are not informed concerning these distinguishing features. Unlimited trinitization may involve either 2 or 3 of the Paradise deities. It is not at all like limited trinitization. A. We are not informed that the trinitizing deities are in any way modified or united for this episode. B. Neither are we informed that any resulting offspring is the equal of the trinitizing deities. C. And we are informed that the Paradise deities can engage in an unlimited number of such trinitizing actions. And then the word trinitize is used loosely as a synonym for the word create. Then we go on to discuss evolutionary techniques. Evolution is a transformative technique that can be defined as creativity in time. It is so related to time, so slowed down in time, that any creature who is concerned in this growth process can perceive what changes are taking place, can partially understand them, and can personally participate in them. As is the case with trinitization, evolution also has its secrets. These are the secrets of Ascendington, and among them is the secret of the evolution of the immortal soul of the mortal sinner. Evolution means that the creative plan is developed gradually and progressively through the provision for and the fostering of the slow growth of all of the capacities of the creatures involved. A created being starts out with an original status that he did not earn. It was bestowed upon him. In contrast to this, an evolutionary being earns everything, even his status as a mature creature. And then we consider pure creation, creation and evolution, and then pure evolution. And then we pointed out evolution can evolve that which cannot be created. Evolutionary beings encompass non-creatable meaning values. The legal experts, the technical advisors, could not be created. Page 280, paragraph 5. The perfecters of wisdom embody the existential wisdom of the Paradise Trinity, but still they require the complement of experiential wisdom provided by the Trinitized Sons of Attainment. Evolution is creativity in time, but it is also something more than this. Evolution can produce certain meanings and certain values that are not creatable. In the evolutionary process, the creator and the creature are in partnership, even as mortal man may enter into partnership with the eternal God through cooperation with God's indwelling spirit, the adjuster. This is well summarized in a statement in the papers. When time-space experience is united with paradise perfection, the net result is something new in the meanings and values of the level concerned. I think that's interesting to contrast 3 transformative techniques: creation, trinitization, and evolution. And without going into any details, there's a 4th technique, fragmentation. There is a 5th technique, eventuation. There is a 6th technique, the slow personalization of a focalization of deity. And there is a 7th technique, the embrace of deity. That changes status. These are the 7 ways in which potentials become actual. creation, trinitization, evolution, eventuation, fragmentation, personalization of a focalization, and the deity embrace. There's 51 bloody pages of this if any member wants to read it. That's the longest one of the whole bunch, isn't it, Bert? It got
Good though. Sure is good.
it got to writing. Well,
You're
yours,
getting power personality synthesis.
yeah, that's a long one too. Yours comes out to 48 pages, but there's some A and B pages in there. Why don't we quit? I'll quit before you shut me off.
Are you tired?
No? But it's 9 o'clock and past. This is putting time. Somebody's going to ask a question about the forward.
Turn off the tape time.
Turn off the
Yeah.
tape, Bert.
Yeah, now, you know.
We'll officially adjourn.
When you turn the tapes off, that always...
That's Timmy.
September 16th,
This
1961.
is September 16th, 1961, and we're discussing, is it ubiquity?
Well, in part,
George is getting ready to tell you what we're
You,
going to
you lead off the discussion, George.
it's not leading off the discussion especially.
Well, draw the horizon line.
As it is letting you know a starting point, and you can discourse. If we had the discussion,
What is the difference in omniscience and ubiquity? That's what we want to know.
omnipresent, omnipresent.
I didn't want to know the answer to one question.
Isn't that it? What we want to know, and I will state the argument from both sides. I mean, the two sides, the discussion, the two sides of the discussion. On one side, we held that God is omnipresent here. The other side of the discussion on this level, here on your rancher right now. On the other side of the discussion was the fact that no, he is not omnipresent, but he is ubiquitous
On this level.
on this level, here. Now, this is the thing that we discussed to great length. Knowing Clyde and our dear friend over here, you probably can understand at what length we went. But we really had a good round and round on it, and we are not at all convinced that he is ubiquitous. I say we, those of us who are on the one side.
I think God is present in all senses of the word. Ubiquitous, omnipresent, and present in a spaceless sense. I think he is present as the universal Father. I think he is present in the transcendental sense. I think he's present in the absolute sense of the word. I think there is, yes, I think there is no place that you can go that is without God's presence. Now, I think from a functional standpoint, his functions are normally withdrawn, but unpredictable. Says the paper in one place, the Father may at any time interpose a fatherly hand in the stream of universe events, all in accordance with the divine purpose, the divine love, and the divine wisdom. It does not say that he does that. It says that he may do that. You can draw your own inference. Now, in terms of the active function of deity presence, you can depend on the ubiquity of the Supreme, the omnipresence of the ultimate, and the timeless and spaceless presence of the absolutes, one of whom also has a space presence.
Wait.
The unqualified absolute. The unqualified absolute, I do not think, is limited in presence, but the unqualified absolute is limited in function to space.
we had no argument, especially with the function of any particular portion or what's the word I'm trying to think?
Degree.
The level of God,
Mhm.
deity. What we were trying to establish very strongly, or we were very strongly trying, not to establish strongly, is God present now?
Yes.
He
Is
is
God, comma, the universal Father, comma, omnipresent, question mark.
I think so, yes.
Thank you.
Now, whether you use the name God,
That's only
the Father, the first source and center, at this point I become extremely confused myself. And I would simply rather say, let's use the word God to designate the whole of that reality, that being.
You're speaking of God on which now?
I'm not trying to differentiate too clearly. I would prefer not to define too clearly. In the finite sense, I think we will conceive of God as ubiquitous. Whether he is or not, I'm not sure. In the ultimate sense, we will conceive of him as omnipresent. And then this is still not his absolute presence.
So we're not concerned with our potential conception.
Yes.
We're concerned with his attributes.
He's here.
Thank
Of this
you.
I'm sure.
Right.
Now,
Not whether we're
is
sharp
he
enough to...
Is he functionally present? I'm profoundly uncertain that he is at all times functionally present. There's a difference between presence and function. You could be present in a room asleep, and in terms of active conscious function, you don't have any.
But weren't concerned with the word function.
Yeah.
except you're present in the word asleep.
You could awake.
You can awaken
Yes.
and be functional.
Yes.
He's there.
Now,
Think.
I make a distinction in my thinking between the presence of God and the function of God. I do not think God has delegated his presence, but I think he has carefully delegated his normal functions. And normally, God is not personally functional outside of Havona except in the presence of his fragments. Normally. Always remember the proviso that he could at any time, as it says elsewhere, he is delegated beyond measure. Nevertheless, his hand is on the mighty veto scepter of the circumstances of the universal realms.
Yeah.
And he reserves final decisions to himself. I suspect that these final decisions are never made by God, because long before they get to God, they encounter some being, some lesser being of adequate perfection, adequate vision, so that there would be no purpose. His action would be redundant. When the ancients of days decide a case, I don't think the Trinity has any reason to function. This is Trinitarian justice in time and space. They could function. There is a court which theoretically is higher than the seven courts of the ancients of days. That's the seven master spirits. If a solitary messenger should ever get fouled up, such a being could be hailed only before this tribunal, but this hypothetical court has never functioned, and I seriously doubt that it ever will function. Nevertheless, this would be the highest tribunal in the universe. Yes.
The papers tell us that God cannot be contained in any one universe or universes because God is infinite.
Mm-hmm.
He fills all of infinity.
That's correct, including
Now-
mid-space.
In another place, it says, "In Him we live, move, and have our
Yes.
being." Well, I don't see how we could unless He was omnipresent.
It also says that it's Creator's Son.
Now, in
Well,
the
the Creator's Son is ubiquitous only through the divine minister.
let's refine
way
our
I-
terms a little bit. Michael is not ubiquitous.
You don't think so?
Michael has space limitations. His divine coordinate has time limitations. Michael is limited in space. Michael cannot be two places at the same time. He can function timelessly. It is only when the Creator Son and Creative Spirit associate that they are able to function timeless and spaceless within the confines of their local universe. The Infinite Spirit, in a sense, is ubiquitous in the evolutionary universes through her focalizations in each universe as the divine minister of that local universe. Now, the word omnipresence is used in a larger and in a smaller sense in these papers. We are told that omniscience, omnipresence, and omnipotence are attributes of the ultimacy of deity, not the absoluteness of deity. These are the biggest words that we even have in our language, and they're only ultimate. God the ultimate is characterized by omnipresence. This statement is practically true. Is this statement unqualifiedly true? No. The presence of the ultimate terminates at the periphery of the master universe. But the master universe is so inconceivably large that to use a lesser word than omnipresence would be almost self-defeating. As we sit here in time and space on this world, God the ultimate is omnipresent. Now, to me, to use a crude illustration, ubiquity is like the grains of sand, and omnipresence is like a body of water. It is a finer degree of presence. In a ubiquitous presence, you should be able to go around the little incidences of the presence, and find surrounding areas where there wasn't quite so much present or none at all, as sand could be spread very evenly over a surface. And still, it would not be that same surface. I'm using the word surface now as analogous to space, and the distribution of the sand grains as similes of ubiquitousness. But if you wet that surface down, or better still flooded it with about an inch of water, it would be absolutely covered with water, wouldn't it? To human perception. So I visualize the interaction of the Supreme and the Ultimate as a sandy bottom underneath water, and the sand is the ubiquitousness of the Supreme, and the water is the omnipresence of the Ultimate. Now, in the larger sense of the word omnipresence, please note they did not say this is an attribute only of God the ultimate. They said it is an attribute of the ultimacy of deity. The Paradise Trinity, as ultimate, is omnipresent, and in my opinion is not limited by the outer periphery of the master universe. That presence goes right on out. And whether it's limited, I doubt that it's limited by mid-space. I wouldn't know. I have difficulty thinking very far into mid-space, because then I want an outside for it too. Sufficient that space has an outside, But I think you should carefully distinguish between presence and function. God the Father has limited himself in function outside of Havona, that others may function. Did he not? There would be no function for anyone. Yes?
So, Bill, in simple words, what we want to know, or what we want to believe, if we are right.
For it too, sufficient that space has an outside, But I think you should carefully distinguish between presence and function. God the Father has limited himself in function outside of Havona, that others may function. Did he not? There would be no function for anyone. Yes?
So the only simple words what we want to know, or what we want to believe, if we are right, that God is present, he is omnipresent,
Yes?
here, right now,
I think so.
On the finite level.
Yes.
on the final level. That's what we want to believe.
Oh, yes.
He is.
Now, experientially, you have you enjoy a dual connection with God.
We're not
First-
worried about contact.
First through the personality circuit, and second through the adjuster. But I don't think you can go anywhere apart from God. But I don't believe you can prove that functionally. I don't believe you can establish the presence of God as you can establish the presence of the Supreme.
But can you prove? You have to believe.
Of course. Now look,
Look at bottom page 44.
try 1296. This is some,
We know about that.
this is some very fancy language in here.
Yes, it is.
And here you will see that the Father is ubiquitous.
Yes.
The ubiquity of deity must not be confused with the ultimacy of the divine omnipresence, sand versus water, in our crude illustration. It is volitional with the universal Father. In other words, God wants it this way. And remember, when they say it is volitional with God, this is a continuing, sustaining act of volition. This is not like human choice, which flashes in time and may not continue. God's choices are continuing phenomena, as a time creature would observe such a choice. When God makes an eternal choice, that means this choice runs just like a telegraph wire. Through space, only it's running through time. This choice is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. It is a continuing choice, a sustaining choice. Or you might say it is a law. God's choices in eternity are the laws governing the universe as observed by time-space creatures. Because God is always, at every present moment, continuing to make that same choice. It is volitional, and so I would modify that and say it is a continuing volitional act with the universal Father, that the Supreme, the ultimate, and the absolute, we're talking about three levels of deity now, should compensate, coordinate, and unify. I mean, adjust, put together, tie together, three things. His time-space ubiquity, the Father's time-space ubiquity,
Universal Father.
the Father's time-space transcendent omnipresence, and the Father's timeless and spaceless universal and absolute presence. God is present right now, here, in three senses. Spacelessly and timelessly. He is omnipresent, which means he is in relation to space, but is transcending space. And he is ubiquitous. He is multi-present in space itself, on the finite level. But, if we read over on the next page, you have a question now as to reality and perception of reality. Because on paragraph 3, it says, only by ubiquity could deity unify time-space manifestations to the finite conception. So, whether God is multi-present, omnipresent, or just present, when men look at this, it's got to be ubiquitous on the finite level. This is a demand which is made by the human intellect.
Now that's for you telling me that's just how it is.
I've just been reading Toynbee's volume 12. And of course I think Arnold J. to me is the second most thrilling intellectual experience of my whole darn life. It's transcended only by the Urantia book. And he's been discussing all the sniping critics that have been shooting these first 10 volumes. And this Englishman is simply profound, because he starts out by an analysis of reality and points out that when men think about reality, they distort it. He runs parallel to the book so many times.
Has anyone ever told you to write the book?
I'm working up to write him a letter sometime. But I just can't do it until I'm sure of how to write that letter, because I don't want to miss. He's looking to the Urantia book. I think you have the same thing. I'm not sure I can find. Let me see. I guess I can. I want to draw an analogy while we're over here.
Your section. Wait a minute.
Yes. Let's take this in terms of another of the attributes of the ultimacy of deity. Let's take it in terms of omniscience. Over on page 1300. Now, you guys really weren't wading in deep water here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
We find one of those questions
7.
once in a while, dear. We had fun with it, too.
On paragraph 7, next to the last paragraph, it refers to something there which is called the supreme correlation of all past, present, and future choice. That's the subject. That's what they're talking about there. In other words, if something is going to correlate, it's going to even out, smooth out, interrelate, compensate, make beautiful, supply missing parts, and so on. And this is some kind of a supreme correlation of all choosing, past, present, and future. And the use of the word supreme suggests to me that it's done with a supreme being, especially since they use time language here, past, present, and future choice. This is part of the explanation, I think, for all things work together for good to those who know God and desire to do His will. In other words, in the long run, it works out, see? And out of evil comes virtue, out of ugliness comes beauty, out of error, men fight through the truth. And the Supreme Being is behind this. This is not an invalidation of choice, free will choice, any more than, on the next higher level up, omniscience invalidates human choice, in the sense of invoking what on the time level would be predestination. Because when you're transcending time, you're operating on an entirely different set of coordinates than you operate on the time base. Here, let me draw a grotesque parallel. I make my living, partly, testing human beings and predicting human success and failure. I am a human bookie. I handicap people instead of horses. Now, we encounter our full percentage of dark horses. But you let me handicap 100 and let them be pretty black and white, not too many grays in there. These are the ones that drive you crazy. And you make some moves that are so far away from projected performance that I would call them foolhardy. And I will guarantee you're going to have a very poor batting average. Now, am I Am I handicapping the free will choice of these human beings? No. I'm merely making a statistical prediction of probability, and statistically it'll pay out. Just as if you go to a bookie, and he's an honest bookie, and you bet on a lot of 20-to-1 shots, you're not going to win as many times as if you bet even money with him. I've never betted a horse race, but this must be the way they compute odds. An even money bet is a favorite, isn't it? And a 20-to-1 is a so-called dark horse.
Long shot.
Yeah. I have successfully predicted human success. I have been much more successful in predicting human failure. This has nothing to do with predestination. This is an estimate of probabilities. And it's very refreshing to encounter a dark horse now and then that upsets your prediction and keeps your hat size fitting. You know what I mean? There's one guy that I can prove he's too stupid to do what he's been successfully doing for 20 years. And you can't be much more wrong than that. Now, the guy works 80 hours a week. If he'd only work a normal work week, I'd win my bet, see? He just works 80 hours a week because he wants to be successful. He's a tariff expert. Practices before Interstate Commerce Commission. He's not smart enough to be a tariff expert, but he is one. And I believe the engineers can prove that a bumblebee can't get off the ground, but the darn thing flies, see?
My daughter constantly laughs because she says, Joel, they go out to the airport and he looks at these big planes. He says they cannot get off the ground, and he still continues to do this now. They can't get off the ground, he'll say. And yet he stands there and watches them fly off, but just that little boy, it just can't be done. Now, that's just all there is to it. It just can't be done.
I have an air pilot friend of mine down in Texas who won't ride in a whirlybird because he said that thing has no business flying.
There's no business flying.
It just has no business flying. You have the same thing about this supreme correlation of volition on the finite level with omniscience, which knows the end from the beginning. And there is a third level for which we have no word, which is the end and the beginning. I am Alpha and Omega. That's not omniscience. That merely says, I am before origins and after destiny. You have, I think, an analogous line of reasoning that we can follow in relation to the almighty power of the Supreme, the omnipotence of the ultimacy of deity, which will someday experientially eventuate as the omnipotence of the ultimate, of God the ultimate, together with some kind of a hypothetical possible unification of the three absolutes, for which again we have no name. We have no name beyond omnipotence or omniscience. Calvin got into trouble because when he thought about omniscience, he didn't know about the absonite level. And if you're going to have omniscience in time, then the whole deal is worked out in time. But God's omniscience in time, I don't think, God's omniscience on the transcendental level has nothing to do with the adventures of the Universal Father's fragments in time. These are sincere, honest adventures. And the outcome is not foreknown in the annals of time. Now I think on Divinington, they do a job up there, and I'll bet you they've got a very good estimate of the probabilities of human survival. They know the gene pattern of that person. They must have some way of getting a transcript of the environmental influence. And I'll bet you they don't make many mistakes up there. I think many a thought adjuster volunteers for a forlorn hope. But I think they have dark horses too.
Yeah.
They don't absolutely know.
You sure missed on Lazarus, one way or the other. Lazarus.
They have their dark horses. This whole universe is shot through with unpredictability. Physicists, human physicists, are just beginning to encounter it in their peripheral researches into non-human matter, the Heisenberg principle of indeterminacy, where these little ultimate particles apparently do about what they damn please, except it averages out. And since you're dealing with such a very large number of such particles, the statistics work. And you apparently have infallible law on the material level. And when you're dealing with gross matter, to all intents and purposes, it's law. You put fire under water, it boils. But there's a certain amount of option exercised by every one of those individual particles. The same applies to people. They say flatly in here that human will is unpredictable. The reactions of the absolutes are unpredictable. A divine counselor can make a pretty good estimate of what a perfecter of wisdom is going to come up with. And of course he can estimate his own thinking or another divine counselor's thinking. But he says, I'm not always sure what a censor's going to rule. I can't always predict the rulings of a universal censor.
Predict the absolute.
No. And the reason you can't is because the absolutes are reacting to a set of coordinates, frames of reference, which are timeless, spaceless. Utterly timeless and spaceless. Now look, let's reason by analogy. A child lives intensely in the present moment. The present moment is like a mouthful of ice cream to that child. It absorbs his entire set of taste buds. That's why a child crams his mouthful, so he can taste more. You know, you get all the buds going that way. An adult begins to emerge from time as he applies memory to the problems of the present, and then invades the future with a forecast of action. We can do this because we are personalities. We can discriminate ends as well as means. So an adult begins no longer to make his decision purely in terms of the immediate stimulus of the present moment. If you're out on the town, and if you decide it would be nice to have a nightcap and you count back, and you say, no, I'm going to be on the job at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, and I've had enough. You are foregoing apparent momentary pleasure because of the demands of tomorrow. An adult's decisions are incomprehensible to a child. Adults are people who do not eat green apples, who do not gorge themselves on ice cream and cake. In fact, who restrain children. Because an adult's thinking is beginning to be less time conditioned than the child's thinking. Consider the action of a very wise man. Consider Adamson's decisions at age 200. This guy's got a lot of experience by now. A lot of experience. Consider the attitude of a seraphim, 700 million years of age. Consider Michael's decisions. And Michael was probably very old when he came out here in time and space, 400 billion years ago, to begin to put this local creation together. In terms of space, environment, if you please, we start out intensely parochial, provincial. The only way of doing it is the way we do it at home. Ma is the best cook in the world. My old man can lick your old man. You know? Any other home is foreign. I mean, they do it queer over at the Joneses, you know. Pa licks them after dinner instead of before dinner when they've been wrong. Then pretty soon, we begin to become a little sophisticated. We learn about other states. We still have great affection for our home, our community, our state. I have a peculiar affection for the state of Oklahoma because I happen to be exactly the same age as this state, and I sort of feel that we've sort of, you know, come along together. And
Now we know how old it is.
You develop a loyalty to your country, which if it simply stops there and you have no religion, you're in danger. You could become a fascist or a communist if your country becomes an idol. The most fascistic statement, I think, that's put in common American language is made by Stephen Decatur, "My country, right or wrong," which in essence says the hell with the rest of the world. But pretty soon you can learn to appreciate an Englishman's loyalty to England. And you can appreciate the pride a Frenchman should have in France, if France would let him. You can appreciate the fact that a Japanese suicide pilot was not crazy. Was a very brave man, willing to swap his life for an American destroyer, let's say. And you can honor that man's loyalty. You're now beginning to grow out of provincialism, parochialism. Pretty soon you can intellectually, to a certain extent emotionally, take pride in the achievement of the whole human race. As you read history, philosophy, you see an old Chinese with truth on his lips, and you're just proud to be a man since he was a man. You belong to the same species. You finally can, in religion, you can't do this in politics, but you can do it in religion. You can partially achieve an ecumenical outlook, the exact opposite of a provincial outlook. The outlook which Jesus portrayed to the 12 when he said, "Go into all the world, no holds barred, men, women, old, young, Jew, Gentile." That's ecumenical. That's the exact opposite of the parochial or narrow or nationalistic outlook. Now, that's as far as we can go in our experience. But vicariously, in our religion, in our theology, in our philosophy, in our metaphysics, in our cosmology, we can, in spirit, apply for our first papers as citizens of the universe. And someday, when we're far traveled, and that will be a long time from now, when we're as old as our seraphim, someday we'll be as old as Michael was when he came out here. It's bound to happen. He had an origin in time. It's a finite number of years. Someday, when we've made the circuit of the 7 super universes, each time going back to paradise with a new perspective, someday we will begin to get a glimmering of a real universal outlook. And now we're emerging from the limitations of space, as we discussed our emergence from the limitations of time. And then we can really begin to be puzzled by the actions of the absolutes, because we will have a toehold, just a toehold, in a timeless and spaceless concept. But such a small beachhead on the shores of infinity. When you look at that and realize that this is still finite, see? This is big finite, though. And above that is the transcendental. And I don't think the architects of the Master Universe understand the absolutes. Because that's one level farther up. That's infinite. Timeless. Spaceless. Endless. Beginningless. Characterized by alwaysness. Reacting to the everywhere and the every when. To me, the aspiration to survive, if you really mean it, is nothing more than making application for your first papers as a citizen of the universe.
Where's the office?
This is all by pre-arrangement. We're going to have an altar call in about 5 minutes. You know, you always have to have a Judas go to the crowd.
That was a 15-minute discourse that was full of stuff. Now, I'll tell you for sure.
He takes for hours of it like that.
George, that's a little preview of something I'm going to write if I live long enough. That's my concept of a fourth commentary on the Urantia book, entitled A Study of Reality. I've got 5 of them in mind. If I live, I'll write them. That's the first one. That's a study of the Master Universe. Second one is a study of the Paradise Ascent. Third one is a synopsis of planetary history. The fourth one is a study of reality. And the last one, if I can write the fourth one, I'll have nerve enough to tackle the last one. A study of God's will.
That's what we had in class the other night. What is God's will?
I'm not old enough and wise enough to try it yet, Wilma.
Why don't you discourse on God's will for us?
I just
We
need...
had it up in class.
All right.
Connection with our...
I'll tell you.
I have a question.
It feels good to win.
I haven't lost it
You lost one.
today.
I need more experience, Wilma. And I need the experience of writing these others first.
Well,
if I can write
Sure,
it.
as a question.
Yes, I do, before we get onto that.
Oh, why don't you wait till we get a new tape on?
All right.
All right. I'll do that. I'll sit here and break this little thing loose from my glasses and scratch my head.
And the horrible thing is, when you try to probe, you're doing it with a finite creature mind, the lowest type of mind in all creation that can attempt such things, and you must distort this stuff up like a pretzel before you get through with it. In the same sense that to develop any feeling for God, he's got to be anthropomorphized. If you really want to know God, understand God, you have got to go to Jesus. There's no other way to do it. You can worship something which you think is greater than the carpenter. But how are you going to commune?
Okay.
Yes, no?
Yes. Oh, well, pardon me, the recording angel isn't spoken.
Little recording angels down there fluttering her wings.
First one I ever saw done up in red. Honey, which side are you on, by the way? Where's all that red?
Now? All right. We were talking, we started out some while ago on the omnipresent. And you said God the absolute is omnipresent.
I misspoke myself. I should have said God the ultimate.
Right. In relation to the firehouse,
Second floor.
is the second floor.
Yeah.
All right. Now about the third floor.
No roof on the third floor, remember?
Yeah, that's true. Is God the absolute also omnipresent?
No. I can help you there. Now, wait a minute. I've got to qualify this. He's more than that. The presence of God the Absolute would be, I think, spaceless, which is more than omnipresent. Now,
It would include omnipresent.
it'd be above it. Wouldn't necessarily include it. The higher does not always include the lower, unless the lower has ascended to the higher. The mighty messenger understands mortal man, but the divine counselor does not. The supreme seraphim, born as such, aspires to work her way downward into the lower level. Now, I can offer this much. In discussing the unqualified absolute in relation to the deity absolute, the unqualified absolute has a space presence. The deity absolute is universally present, but hardly space present. That's pretty close to a direct quote.
Unqualified could be omnipresent here.
As we would use the word yes, I'm not sure that would be the most refined possible concept. But yes, practically speaking. Except I don't like to associate the word omnipresent with the absolutes. It's a function of the ultimacy of deity. I would much more, instead of saying that the unqualified absolute is omnipresent, I would rather say that God the ultimate as omnipotent is omnipresent. And the presence of the unqualified absolute is a superior presence to that. But I haven't got a word, see? And I can't use the word spaceless because he's functionally present in space. To our perspective, I think omnipresent would be virtually correct. But I feel a little uneasy about applying that word. But I think it's the only word we have to apply.
I'm trying to see how far I can go with this omnipresent. That's why I...
Right.
Why don't that give us a good definition for omnipresent? It is water.
Water in relation to sand on a surface.
Comparatively...
The sand being ubiquitous and the water being omnipresent. The sand has interstices. You could have a layer of sand, but it's not.
Got a frosting there.
Yeah. There's space in there. You can prove it. The water will seep in.
Void space between.
Yeah. The grains of sand, to me, are a good crude illustration of ubiquity. And the liquid water is a good crude illustration of omnipresence. Where a surface symbolizes space.
Our discussion stems not from the function, but from the attribute of the universal cause.
That's what we were saying, Bill.
That's all we had.
Yeah.
And our point of difference came at the level
Right.
of the omnipresence, and as to the omnipresence
I would-
of the universal Father.
I would
not the
argue
function.
for God's presence in all senses of the word. Now, can you depend on God's functions? No.
Nor our conception.
Neither can you deny that he may function. But I would say it's statistically improbable that he will, because he's got this thing well organized. And if a president has done a good job of setting up the corporation, he should seldom give direct orders in the shipping department. As a foreman of shipping. A good corporate organization would suggest this. And what presidents do, they have a loused-up organization.
Bill, is it true that only by volition does the Universal Father limit himself in the supreme condition?
Yes.
In the ultimate?
Yes, yes. And the reason this goes on eternally is because he doesn't change his mind. But he could. He could. But when he separates himself from the absolute person, thus constituting this being his son, and when he focalizes all spiritual gravity in that person and constitutes the son, the high spiritual administrator, the paradise, and time and space, and all else, the son just never gives him any reason to intervene, because his function is flawless and perfect. And when they project themselves in their spirit, they do so without limitation, without qualification, so that the third person is truly infinite and must be infinite in perfection. And when the spirit coordinates the patterns of paradise with the values of spiritual reality, and in so doing projects mind as a third energy, this is all done in flawless perfection, timeless and spaceless, absolute, unconditioned perfection. And why would God intervene? I don't think God could improve on the acts of the Son and the acts of the Spirit. Now, when you go below this level, God has good reasons for not intervening, even though perfection ceases to be absolute below this level. Because if God intervened, then he would fill all, and there could be no experience. And had that been the intent, Havona would have been projected as the universe of infinity, which was well within God's power. But God chose to impose a quantitative limit on Havona, even though the paper strongly suggests he did not impose qualitative limitations on Havona. There's a strong suggestion in more than one place in these papers that there's a lot going on in Havona that is going to be imperceptible to finite beings, such as Havona pilgrims like us when we go through Havona. We're just going to see Havona life on the first floor of the firehouse.
Like the Russians show us over there.
Yes.
What they want us to see.
Yeah. For example, I don't think Gran Fanda had any direct contact with the Eternal Son in his 7 bestowals on the Havona circuits. Gran Fanda had contact with the original Michael, who interpreted these transcendental bestowals to the finite level. But I think there are many beings in Havona, besides transcendentalers, who are not mentioned in these papers, who got a great deal out of the 7 bestowals of the Eternal Son. I think Havona is a multi-level universe. But then so is Orvantan. Most of Orvantan is finite, time and space. But how about the primary force organizers? They're not. On Universa there sits a council of equilibrium, made up of associate transcendental master force organizers. And these beings are not finite. There are architects of the master universe operating in Orvantan. There are personalized adjusters operating in Orvantan. And don't think for 1 minute that the stationary sons of the Trinity are finite limited. They seem to be finitely functional because they're working in a finite universe, a time-space universe. So that's all the use they have for whatever attributes they have. But I don't think the Ancients of Days are in any sense finite limited any more than the Master Spirits are. And the Master Spirits are defined as having the supreme, the ultimate, and the supreme ultimate attributes collectively of the Infinite Spirit. When the 7 Master Spirits unite in the presence of the third source and center, they there and then constitute themselves the Infinite Spirit in all functional levels this side of the Absolute. Does this help?
Sure.
Here, I think
Only I need some help in absorption. My bladder's going a little bit soaky here.
in mortal man, there are 2 superfinite aspects: personality and the thought adjuster. Neither personality nor the adjuster are finite limited. Although personality is functionally limited to the finite in the present universe age, there are some dormant dimensions in personality which are simply going to be dormant as long as we work on the finite level. But they're there, so they tell us. And the adjuster, being a spark of infinity itself, I'm sure is functional on all levels of the firehouse. When the adjusters are personalized, they function on all levels, even to the level of the ultimate absolute. So right here, in us critters, there are 2 endowments, not surprisingly, both proceeding from the Universal Father, which are not limited to time and space in the finite level, but are functionally so limited in the present universe age. I think when we break through the finite, did you folks see The Wizard of Oz, the movie? Do you remember when you went from Kansas to Oz, and suddenly it went from drab black and white to Technicolor? That's what's going to be like when we break through. And if you've been colorblind all your life, and you could suddenly be given color vision, you would suddenly experience something that you could have known about only intellectually, but never experientially. Any more than a midware knows what the color green is in terms of human experience. A midware has a sensory mechanism. Let's talk about a secondary because he's physical. Correctly name the color green based on his analysis of the wavelength of visual light. So he can talk to a human being about something green, but no midware has ever seen the color green because they don't have eyes. And a midware would perceive a continuous belt of radiation going right down into the infrared and right on up into the ultraviolet, where we suddenly stop seeing. Although we can feel sunburn the next day and we can sense heat through other parts of our sensory mechanism. We can prove it's there, but not with our eyes.
answered questions for me and all.
I haven't answered any questions.
All right, you have discussed.
I've just been describing some things. If I could answer them, I'd understand reality.
You began when she